Hi, mystery authors. Welcome to Write a Killer Mystery, where we learn to make a good mystery great. And today I want to talk about why mystery writers have a leg up on mastering that muddy middle of the novel. Okay, first, I want to thank my patrons on Patreon for their continued support of this video series and also my mystery writing. And if you would like to join us, there's a link in the description below. Patrons have special blogs, their own videos, where I talk more about mystery writing and also have a window into my writing progress. Anyway, I'd love to see you there. So, whoa, the difficult, muddy middle. It's a big part of your story, and mystery writers have a great guideline to keep them from having that muddle in the middle, and actually it's a guideline for conquering the muddy middle. In many genres, the vast middle, and that's actually 75% of your story, right, has main plot points, a first pinch point, the middle, the second pinch point, but not much about how to write those 200 or so pages that make up the bulk of your story. So what comes before the midpoint, what happens at the midpoint, what happens after the midpoint, how does it lead to the climactic conclusion? But so when the middle is muddy, it's that way because the story really doesn't progress. There's one scene after another, and the story becomes episodic, and that this happened, and then that happened, and then that happened, without building stakes or heading toward a climax. But mystery writers have guidelines for mastering the middle. So I wanted to talk a little bit about those today. The first half of the middle, you expand. It's that simple. From the inciting incident to the midpoint, you're expanding the detective's information and the reader's information. Once your detective takes on the case, they need to gather information, and each piece of evidence and each suspect identified and each clue and each suspect interview expands your detective's understanding of the victim's world. So in that first half of the middle, your sleuth broadens their understanding of the victim. And this is the section where you introduce suspects, new characters for your reader to try to understand. And just like your detective, your reader wants to know more to try to identify the villain, but we're not even close to that yet. All right. So the first half of your middle up to the midpoint, you're just adding information. Your detective and your reader are learning more about what the possibilities are that led to the victim's death. Now, at the midpoint, something happens, and your detective has a new interpretation of everything that they've learned so far. All right? Your detective has gathered a diverse array of information, and working on their assumption, they try to solve the mystery. But at the midpoint, your detective realizes that everything they thought so far isn't working. Their interpretations of clues and events is leading nowhere. And here's where you keep your reader guessing by showing your detective stumped by everything they know so far. And the reader's like, wait, we got all this information. This is kind of what's going on in their head. We got all this information and the detective can't figure it out. You know, like, what's going to happen next? And even worse, often at the middle, the detective feels like giving up. It's just too hard. It's too baffling. Nothing makes sense. But then they have a new insight. They have a new way of looking at the information. There may be a what if, or they may reinterpret as something a suspect said or did. They may have a new piece of evidence. Somebody says something that makes them look at a piece of information in a new way. Somehow there's a turnaround for your detective at the midpoint, and that new insight sets them on a new path, and that is the path of the second half of your middle. And the second half of your middle is all about contracting, while the first half is expanding the information and gathering as much information as possible. Now your detective has to wade through all of this and eliminate ideas, eliminate suspects one by one to narrow everything down to identifying the villain. Identifying the villain is going to be the beginning of the very last part of your story. But this part, the third part after the middle, is all about taking all that information and narrowing it down. Your detective starts on a path that contracts all the information. It's all about contraction. And that contraction leads them toward unearthing the villain. However, and this is how you keep that middle from being muddy, all right, this path is filled with obstacles. It is, you are going to give your detective so much trouble, all right? A suspect may reverse what they said earlier. Let's see. Or the most likely suspect so far all of a sudden has a steadfast alibi. They just couldn't have been the one, and now your detective has to look. That suspect is eliminated, right? We're contracting. And now your detective has to keep looking. Also, the other characters and subplots can cause more trouble in this part of your story. So, an opponent who's just set on obstructing your detective in their pursuit of the truth comes up with a big obstacle, or a love interest leaves, or a sidekick gets into trouble. All these things compound what's going on in this third part of your mystery story. So lots of trouble as your detective is narrowing down the suspects. So whatever the obstacles, the stakes for your detective involvement also get bigger. And the stakes can be professional, emotional, psychological, or physical. And they may get in a fight, real physical fight. So whatever the stakes, your detective is under threat in this part of your mystery story. You want to bring up some threats. So whatever the obstacles or stakes, your detective slowly narrows the field of who the killer could be. As all these things are happening, all these obstructions, and all these questions that are raised that keep your reader wondering what is next. The main path of this section of your story is narrowing things down as your detective gets closer to identifying the villain. So we are lucky. All of that sets sets the reader up for the final act. But we have guidelines as mystery writers for conquering the middle, and I think it's great. We get to avoid a lot of the problems that other genre writers have. When you keep the order for writing the middle of your novel, expansion, reversal, contraction. Just think of it that way. Expansion, reversal, contraction. You have guidelines for the content of each part of the middle. And you time the discoveries your detective makes, placing them in sequence. Is this an expansion discovery or a contraction discovery? So the first half is all about discovering new information, and the second half of the middle is all about discovering the misinterpretations and eliminating information that's not pertinent as your detective gets closer to the villain. So you create actions that fit that mystery sequence. You make it easy for your reader to follow along and reward them with the type of story they want to be reading, a mystery. And this is how you guide them through that great big huge middle of your story. So expand, reverse, contract. The middle is where you deliver on the story promise you made at the beginning. I'm going to give you a good mystery, and here's where you do it, okay? And then some quick tip about writing advice while you're writing each section of your middle. Don't let your mind rush ahead to another part of your story. Stay focused on that part of the story that you're writing. So in the first draft, you're concentrating on adding new information. That is your main goal in the first half of the middle. And in the second half, you're concentrating on shifting your detective's focus to reinterpret what they've learned so far, and also to include any new information that might come up. So if you follow this simple formula, you'll keep that big middle from being episodic or muddy, and you lead your reader down the path to a great mystery story. I hope that helps. Just think, expand, reverse, contract, and you'll know what to do in each part of that big middle that you need to conquer. Okay, hope that helps. I'd love to hear your comments about this, because I think as mystery writers, we really do have an advantage over many genre writers of conquering what am I going to do for those 200 pages of the middle. Okay, thanks. So once again, I want to thank Audible for sponsoring Write a Killer Mystery, and suggest if you haven't tried Audible, there's a link in the description below for a free 30-day trial. And one of the things you can do is listen to other mysteries. And in Audible, you can actually bookmark places that you like. So if you have Audible or you want to try it, you might try listening to a mystery and then bookmarking where that expansion starts, and then bookmarking the middle where the detective has a complete reversal and almost gives up and turns things around, and then bookmark in the third part of the middle where exactly you have the idea that the detective is getting closer to the villain. And I think that'll help you understand how to write your mystery. Anyway, Audible, it's lots of fun. Whatever you do, whether you want to study or not, it's a great way to get in touch with many authors and many stories. All right, thank you so much. Keep writing, and I'll see you next time.